So Tristan Walker is no stranger to business and entrepreneurship. He was a business director at Foursquare, the location app, and he was the entrepreneur in residence at venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. But his signature business idea emerged from a very personal issue and problem to solve. So in 2013, Tristan launched Bevel, a single blade razor system designed specifically for Black men, inspired by his own search for shaving products that did not cause razor bumps, something that was not available on the market. Fast forward 9 years later, and the Bevel's brand of men's grooming products and now personal care products are sold at national retailers from Target to CVS to Sally Beauty. In 2018, Procter & Gamble acquired Bevel's parent company, Walker & Company, and Tristan still leads his namesake business as the first Black CEO in P&G's 180-year history. So today, Bevel competes with hot brands like Dollar Shave and Harry's, but it's found its own niche, carving out a space for African-American men and people of color who've long been underserved in the consumer products market. So I want to say welcome to Tristan. I'm so pleased to have him here. He's going to share Walker & Company's growth story, share actionable insights on how he scaled the business, broke into big retail, and how the company is navigating the financial landscape and supply chain challenges that all businesses are facing today. So welcome, Tristan. Thank you. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm curious about, the critical moves that you made to turn your idea into a bonafide brand.
So one thing that's really important to me is to do something that I felt uniquely positioned to do, where my own lived experience could help inform the thing that I was going to create. Entrepreneurship is hard enough. I felt the way to make it less difficult is to do something that comes from an authentic place. For 15 years, I was unable to shave. Every single way I encountered facial hair removal was terrible. And I felt there had to be a better way. And one day I was encouraged to use this thing called a single blade, double-edged safety razor, used it, woke up the following morning without razor bumps on my face. It was an incredible epiphany for me after 15 years of using things that didn't work to finally have something that worked. It was a first moment of truth that was really, really authentic. That I said, wow, here's an opportunity for me to grow something for, the 40 plus million Black folks that potentially will have to deal with these issues as well. And not only kind of the Black folks have to deal with it, non-folks of color who have to deal with it too. So I felt uniquely positioned given the authentic connection to the problem, my ability being out in Silicon Valley at the time to be able to raise money for a company like this. I felt uniquely positioned to be doing this at that particular time.
How did you turn that initial interest from Target into a true partnership? With shelf space and end caps in stores. I'm trying to always want to demystify that leap, which is
sure.
Which is demystified very much. It's
yes. We were very fortunate. We each month will send out what's called Net Promoter Score emails, right? Where we ask, how likely are you to recommend this product to a friend, for example? And you could rate it from 1 to 10. And you could also leave comments about kind of your experience with the product. And at the time when we were doing it, I would read all of the comments, every single one, right? So we got these Net Promoter Score comments, and I saw that there was one gentleman who left this comment with a glowing review of the product. And, his email was firstname.lastname@target.com. And then 2 comments beneath that, I saw another glowing comment from another gentleman who was firstname.lastname@target.com. It turned out that the first gentleman was the head of personal care for Target, and the other guy was the head of shave for Target. Who would have ever guessed, right? Now, how do you make the leap from getting to where we were to shelf? Well, first of all, I reached out. We met them about a month later, and then 3 months later, we were on shelves. And that was because they already had a point of view about this guest. Target has made great inroads over the past couple decades right? In engaging with kind of the Black guests. And as they thought about the male aisle, they saw Bevel as an opportunity to more deeply engage in an authentic way. So, I will be the first to admit that we were privileged to have an experience where I happened to be reading the comments from customers that day. But first lesson learned, even as CEO, read those comments, right? Because you never know the opportunities that might come out of it. And hadn't I read those comments, we would not be in Target today, most likely.
And opportunity met, that. I'm curious what the biggest challenges in this journey, 9 years, you faced in growing your business, and how did you tackle them? What comes to mind as sort of seminal roadblocks, challenges, and then meeting those challenges?
I've had to go through, reductions in force and layoffs and lawsuits and all types of craziness that, will make you buckle. But you just have to have the fortitude to get it. When I started the company, it was important for me to write down not only the values that I had personally, but make sure that the values that I had personally actually matched the values that we had for the company. Courage was the first one, right? If we're going against these large incumbents who've been around for hundreds of years, we have to have the courage to knock them down from their kind of title, so to speak. Inspiration, respect, judgment, wellness, loyalty. These are things that guide all of our decisions objectively, right? As I talked about kind of entrepreneurships being hard enough, why make it harder if you don't know who you are or the framework by which you're going to make decisions, right? So look, from the time I started the company, from raising money to having an inability to raise money, from hiring folks to having to let folks go, right? To having acquisition talks to have them go away. We've literally been through it all, but these guiding values have actually got us through it. So as an entrepreneur, I always encourage entrepreneurs to do two things. Number one, write down what your personal values are, because if you don't know who you are, your company won't know who you are. And then the second thing, I have a lot of entrepreneurs who come to me saying, hey, I want to start a company, right? And the first question I tend to ask them in response is, well, do you want to run it? And 99.9% of the time, they don't have an answer. Running a company is very different than starting one. And the quicker folks get to understanding what that means and what that difference is, the easier it's going to be. And it's not easy, but it's going to be easier.
So in a sentence, what's the difference, the important difference that people don't know, that you know now, that you wish that you knew, right, you tell your younger self?
Yeah, as a manager, you have to expand your capacity for empathy in ways that you would have never anticipated beforehand.
Huge. I wanted to unpack that a little bit and take that out of the abstract. If you were to talk about the two opportunities that you seized on that led to your company's growth. So, we know the challenges, but what were those pivotal opportunities that speak to a larger that are actionable insights for businesses that?
Yeah. So the first one was feeling and being uniquely positioned and authentic to do it, right? Because if I am, that's a story that people are willing to talk about and celebrate and share, right? So when I was starting Walker & Company, it made sense for a lot of people because these themes, as they're related to cultural connectivity of Black consumers, technology's impact on that cultural connectivity, and the development of great brands, those are all themes that my career has been so uniquely focused on that it made sense, right? It wasn't this guy trying to take this truly capitalist approach to innovation, right? This guy did it authentically, taking some semblance of a capitalist approach to it, but the authenticity actually mattered. And then I think the second thing for me, which, I've reflected on this fairly recently, but certainly throughout my experience leading the organization, is that we have a corporation that has always been majority folks of color, majority, at least in our case, folks of color in positions of leadership at my company, certainly majority Black women too, which has been something I've been very proud of. The diversity of our employee base reflects the diversity of our consumer base. And you'd be surprised at the comparative advantage we have as a result of having that diversity. We make things that solve our problems first. We're a bit selfish in that way. But because we solve our problems, we're likely solving problems for the tens of millions of people who look like us too.
That's huge. So in 2018, you got the attention of P&G, Procter and Gamble, and which is many a startup's dream. And I'm curious about what you and which acquired your company, but obviously you're leading the company, your namesake brand. What what was the critical thing you did that got the attention of this big consumer products company?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that we got their attention before 2018. And I think there are a few reasons for that. First, we had products that worked. We had products for an audience that celebrated our meaning on behalf of that audience, right? Like we prioritize their needs first. We celebrate the transcendence of the culture across ethnicity. It's generational in nature, right? With no, what's the word I'm looking for? Differences in how we actually show up on their behalf, right? So we have in this category, no one has appealed to the Black male guest as Bevel has. And this is a consumer that every single company in the world wants and doesn't know how to get and engage with. And look, I mean, I think when you think about these acquisitions or partnerships, they go both ways, right? And I'll tell you two things that were fascinating as I kind of reflect back on how we got together. The very first article that was ever written about us on launch, the title said, Tristan Walker building the Procter & Gamble for people of color. And we announced our acquisition 5 years to the day of that publication of that article. And then second, as we were negotiating kind of a deal, you realize something very quickly. Our values matched. As I talk about values, literally, like if you write them down and compare them, very close. And then our missions were very similar. P&G's goal is to improve the lives of consumers every day. They serve 5 billion people around the world every day, the majority of whom look closer to me, right? And then for Walker Company, our goal was to make health and beauty simple for people of color, right? So there's a very kind of symbiotic relationship to be had there. We spoke to a number of larger companies that were excited and interested in what we did, and P&G was obvious for us, so much so that from the time we met to the time we announced that acquisition is 3-4 months. Is very quick, and I'm fortunate for that.
Yeah, so it was an alignment, an extension essentially of their mission.
Yes.
I'm wondering about innovation. I know that you guys are not necessarily trend driven. However, the consumer has changed, particularly post pandemic. How do you balance your innovation, your solution-based products with leaning into the needs of a consumer in a very changed landscape? What's the story now? If we had to say these are the takeaways that we need to be following this because of the market has changed while staying within our own framework of innovation.
I think in our category, the market hasn't changed. Just our demands have been louder and more serious. We've been neglected for far too long. And that's why rather than following trends, we take this problem solution approach. Look, we have a double-edged safety razor that's been around for 100 years. There's no new innovation there other than the fact that this works for you and your skin type. Even for some of the more innovative products that we have an electric trimmer. We just launched what we believe to be the world's most advanced grooming device, a Bevel Pro kind of clipper and trimmer 2-in-1 device, where, look, of course, there are just very interesting, forward-looking, set the trend elements to it. But at the end of the day, it cuts your hair well, it lines up your hair well, and it doesn't give you the irritation that others would, right? Simple, brass tacks stuff, but we're demanding it now from large corporations to give it to us as consumers. And I think, fortunately for Bevel, we've been offering and satisfying those demands, and more important, anticipating them before we even have to be demanded of it.
Best practices in this market, a couple of things you found that have worked in terms of supply chain challenges as well as inflation.
Yeah, that's a great question. Wow, that's deep. All right, so from a supply chain perspective, I'll say it in two ways: as a startup and now working at P&G. I couldn't have imagined going through what we've had to go through over the past year or 2 years as a startup. I am wholly empathetic to what that means, right? Because a lot of the supply chain infrastructure prioritizes the big companies, which means that you're left behind. You are cash constrained, right? It's hard to be very flexible and agile, and consumers are demanding things, you know? So I kind of say what I'm saying with the understanding that I am in a truly privileged position as a P&G partnered company now, right? Where we have less concern about that because P&G is a global diversified business with scale, right? So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. What can you say that is applicable or adoptable for those smaller businesses or startups?
Yeah. I think the thing that's really important to remember and realize is a lot of us are doing too many things, right? And what these past 2 years have taught us is that there has to be a back to basics experience. And entrepreneurs are very optimistic, and they should be, right? But they're optimistic until they have to experience a 3 standard deviation move that we would have never thought, i.e. a pandemic. That's global, where supply chain shuts down. So I think when I go back to this idea of humility, make room for the worst happening, right? And the best way to do it is to simplify your infrastructure. So even throughout the kind of pandemic, we've had to simplify our infrastructure. The number of SKUs we've had, the number of color variations that we have, the number of manufacturers that we work with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Simplification always works better. And that simplification allows you to conserve cash. You have to hire fewer people, right? So in times like this, you don't have as much volatility. So again, I'm very fortunate, at least within the larger company that's diversified, to hedge some of those mistakes. But know that as an entrepreneur or even a leader in a growth company, you're going to make mistakes. And sometimes mistakes will happen to you as opposed to your being the cause of it. And simplification is always the easiest way to get around it.
What's a piece of advice that might surprise a viewer, but it's so, or that goes unsaid, and from your own particular experience, like, oh my God, this is such a helpful thing that I wish I knew when I was growing my business? What would you tell an audience of, the next startup that wants to be in Target or or across industries? What would you say that's not said that from an insider perspective?
I'll give the advice that I always give. I mean, to me, it came from Tyler Perry, actually. And I always give the example of, something he said when I was in LA with him. We're kind of talking to small business owners just about entrepreneurship. And Tyler, I mean, he's one of the most incredible entrepreneurs ever, right? So there's one small business owner that raised their hand. She said, Mr. Perry, you go through all these trials and tribulations as an entrepreneur. Like, what do you do to get back up when you go through them? And what he said next was so profound, right? That like it has stuck with me and will continue to. He said he recognized his potential as an entrepreneur when he understood that the trials you go through and the blessings you receive are the exact same things, right? Those trials are lessons, those lessons are blessings, and you have to appreciate them. And the reason it was so resonant for me is I tell entrepreneurs too, and this might come off as taboo, entrepreneurship, management, being a CEO sucks. It is the worst job in the world. It's terrible. It's misery. But it is the most rewarding thing I've ever had to do, and I can't see myself doing anything else, right? So you have to, if you're going to do this, you have to recognize and respect the math that I had talked about a little earlier. You have to recognize that things can happen to you that are unexpected. But now, having gone through all this stuff, I've gone through things that 99.9% of the world has not had the ability to. And that just makes me all the wiser. It makes me a better CEO. It makes me a better husband. It makes me a better father. It makes me a better son. It makes me a better leader writ large. So if you lean into the trials as blessings, it's only going to compound a positive impact on your experience. And I think it will make the entire experience all the more rewarding.
That's terrific. That is profound. the hurdles are the blessings if we can learn from them, essentially,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And
They build patience.
Exactly. I'm so pleased. I don't want to say goodbye, but that's all the time we have. You've been a delight. Thank you so much, Tristan.
Thank you.